Welcome back to the Forging Alpha Podcast, episode 2. Caleb and Ricky here, and today we're talking about fitness.
We're talking about fitness.
I'm excited for it. We came into it deciding whether we were going to talk about fitness or business today, and we decided to talk about fitness, which, I mean, both of those are some pretty broad topics that we could talk about the entirety of this podcast and never get to the bottom of all of it. So
Yeah, 100%. I think, though, to fitness, I think it's a good leadway. Second episode, because I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like fitness, health, kind of precedes most of the things that people underestimate. You know, they call it the fat man in the red BMW. Like, I guess you get to the point where you have all the money in the world, but if you don't have health or function or fitness, most people end up wanting to trade that for everything. So
the trouble with that, though, is you really don't get that realization, I don't think, until you're decades down that lifestyle. Like, a lot of younger people, especially motivated guys, played sports in high school. Like we talked about last time, kind of filling that void after you don't have sports anymore or some type of competition. If you don't fill that void and you stop working out, stop training, stop moving around as much, and you're just focused on work, focused on succeeding financially, and you're chasing down that path for 10, 20 years, you're slowly getting in worse and worse shape, and it's getting more and more difficult to get back to where you were.
Where do you think that we've talked about this before. Last podcast, we talked about how obviously we keep that somewhat in the forefront of our lives. Where have you seen, like, going back to this past year or the past 2 years when you let that slip out of your life a little bit, what were the negative aspects that you saw in terms of how it impacted your day-to-day life, energy levels, even how it impacted your professional life?
Yeah. So the energy level is a huge part of it, but I think it's even a little bit more than just energy. Your motivation, or at least my motivation, is so much higher. I have more drive, and that's partially the hormone balances also. But when I'm actually training and making progress towards something and I'm doing what I say that I was going to do, I'm just so much more motivated, and I feel like I have a higher energy level to tackle whatever's going on.
Yeah.
So when I wasn't going to the gym, I felt like I was kind of negative and sort of down in the dumps, so to speak, because I wasn't training. And then once I started getting that back, that kind of turned around with it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think for me, the transition from doing it because I was an athlete to then figuring out what works for me and like the sustainability of that and enjoying training and also doing things that haven't beat me up. I feel like that adjustment, that adaptability has been really big for me, because I would say, like, being in college and then even post training more powerlifting-esque was awesome for the time that I was doing, especially when I was in the environment with college and being on a baseball team where you had that. I think that you still have access to that if you do CrossFit or you do some things. But I hit a point where I didn't enjoy that quite as much. I was feeling more beat up and maybe lack of energy doing a certain way. And for me, I think one thing that has helped me with staying consistent with it and is just pivoting and adapting to training in ways that I enjoy, that are sustainable for me, that I can still put a majority of my focus into my day from a business perspective, from a work perspective. And like, I just don't have the luxury anymore of, like, my entire life is centered around leg day. And I've got the rest of the day to just recover from that and focus on being in the gym for 2 hours.
Man, those were good times, but yeah, not super sustainable for most people.
No, I don't know how it is for you, but do you feel like, you know, those days when you used to be training in the gym for 2 hours, maybe it's just getting a little bit older. Maybe it's just because maybe I'm not as good as shape anymore. And the baseline for cardiovascular isn't as much there as when I was doing 3-hour practices. But I just feel like some of those days, the rest of the day is shot for me mentally.
Oh, yeah.
After those 2-hour-long leg days.
And just, I think we talked about it last time, but at some point you're just doing junk volume and you're not making that much progress anyways. You're just hammering and hammering and hammering because it's fun.
Yeah.
And you don't have anything else to do.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe I'm just being a pussy, and maybe
Maybe
there's other
Maybe
people
you
that do
gotta-
it.
Maybe you got to go back to the 2-3 hour workouts, man.
Maybe. Also,
I'm gonna stay away from those though. I feel like powerlifting, when I was really training towards that, is when I got some of those really long workouts too, though.
yeah,
Like I have the young days when we were bodybuilding and doing shows and stuff that I had some pretty long workouts. But then powerlifting, if you get up to 7-8 sets on, for me, I take even a long time between bench sets, but it could be 6-7 sets of squat. That's going to take a while,
yeah,
or at least it takes me a while.
yeah. And I think looking at like what I do now, I use a lot more of the machine work that I do. I was talking with a client yesterday. He's in that point of transitioning from baseball out, and he's like, I'm going to probably continue training this style. And he's like, I know you still do some of the fitness side of things online. And I'm like, if you enjoy what you're doing and you like training, I mean, conjugate is what he was talking about, the West Side barbell powerlifting style. And I told him, I was like, if you still enjoy doing that, keep going with that as long as you can, because I think post-athletic career, you've got to find the thing that keeps you coming back the most consistently. Because I feel like people, they just go in the gym doing something they don't really want to do. They feel like they need to do X, Y, Z. And while that's probably important if you've got certain goals, it's probably just as important training in a way that leaves you feeling good or you enjoy looking forward to doing that. And I told him, like, if you still enjoy doing that, write that out as long as you can. For me, like, that was the point 2 years post being an athlete that I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed training, but they got to a certain point when, like, I kind of want to pivot from this. I want to go to focusing more on bodybuilder style of training, do more machine work, do more controlled sets to failure and pushing it versus focusing on 1 rep maxes,
Bar speed.
as much bar speed and doing that. And for me, it's something that I just feel a little bit better. I feel less beat up. I'm getting to the point now where it's like, all right, I've gone completely this one direction. I'm going to start bringing it back towards a good hybrid of feeling more athletic with the bodybuilding stuff. Like, I'm going to add more jumps into there. I've added more sprinting, getting back into that style, because I think it kind of worked against me in terms of some of the, resilience that you build up, focusing more on athletic styles of training. That's such a broad, dumb word. But, when you're not sprinting as much, you're not jumping, you're not focusing on speed work with the bar. But circling back to what I was saying, I told him, as long as you want to do that, but then once you're kind of ready to be a washed up guy that just wants to be a meathead, we'll talk about it, because that's the point that I'm not. I'm a washed up athlete that I just want to be a meathead right now.
Yeah, I just want to still feel like I'm in shape. I will say the athletic training, though, that's something I want to start doing more of as well, because when I feel like an athlete, I feel like I have just so much more energy throughout the day. When it's easier to move around and you have a little bit of spring in your step, you just have more energy, or at least I do. Yeah. And it's fun.
Yeah.
Being able to run and jump and move.
I think something that you underestimate earlier in your life, but then when you start getting away from that, like you start getting away from your football career or your baseball career, I think those qualities, those traits last for a bit. Mm-hmm. You can kind of sustain them. And then when you start getting to closer to 30 and maybe you're foregoing a little bit more of the mobility work, you're not focusing on much as on the plyometrics or the sprinting, or I hate the word, but from the functional stuff, I do think it probably,
it's so overused, but it's the perfect word for it.
Yeah. I think, and that's the thing where I think everything can be functional. A bicep curl can be functional if that's what your goal is. Probably just as much as standing on a Bosu ball and catching tennis balls with a blindfold on can be.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it's, I'm at the point where building stages of business, I don't want something that's taking away half my day. And then I'm spending the rest of the half of the day trying to recover from that. I've got brain fog trying to be on calls and being sharp.
Well, you got the 2 hours before that you're thinking about your workout, getting ready and everything.
Yeah. And I see that as an issue with a lot of people, because going back to that off and on switch, the people that are the January 1sters, I'm sure you know people like this, like they always try to come back to how they trained when they were in high school football, or they were an athlete before. and then they just end up falling off the wagon because
like when they just jump right back in.
Yeah, or they're going back into the gym trying to do the 2-hour workouts that they were doing when all they had was homework and being in the gym. And then inevitably that ends up falling off because they're not adapting anything, and then they're like, I just destroyed myself, and I feel crappy for the next week, and so eventually it just stops working, or they stop doing it. Right?
Totally, or they don't even start in the first place because they're looking at their schedule and they're like, well, I know I can't fit a 2.5-hour workout in, so I'm just not going to do anything at all. Because they think they got to put 2.5 hours in to get the progress like they used to.
Yeah. I also know people that, I feel we all have that too, where I know people that are like, I'm not going to start really training intensely until I've got my supplements in, or I start getting on my diet. Like all of these stars have to be lined up. I made a post about this the other day. It's like if the stars haven't lined up for you yesterday, it's probably not happening today.
I saw
like
that.
You continuing to wait for everything to be perfectly lined up for you to be less busy. You can probably think back 10 years ago. You're probably just as busy as you are now. It was just different stuff. Like there's always just going to be the next thing that's going to be added to your plate, and adding more or progressing with it is much easier than just starting. So you might as well do it and figure it out. And if you can figure it out while you're in a busy stage of life, it's going to make it that much more easy when you're not busy,
If that ever comes.
If that ever
You're
comes.
exactly right. Most likely you're going to be more busy down the road. So now is probably the best time to get started with something like that. I am guilty of it though. I've had times where I've been in a similar boat where if I'm not eating correctly or tracking my macros, I feel like it's almost just throwing the results out the window.
Yeah.
And I have struggled with that a little bit, but after doing this for, 14, 15 years, whatever it's been since that I've been training, you kind of get used to how you need to be eating, even if you're not diligently tracking it.
Yeah.
So I know I'm somewhat close, but I could still have that extra 20%,
This year, I've been way more on top of things just because it hit me at a certain point of if I'm coaching this stuff, then I probably need to be a really good example about living that out. And it hits a certain point where you're so busy with stuff that the temptation to almost have your own nutrition, fitness, get put on the back burner tends to happen. And then it gets to a certain point of I'm kind of a hypocrite if I'm preaching and coaching and teaching this, because it doesn't really matter how much you do it. Eventually you're going to lose respect if you're the out of shape person who's trying to teach
You cannot be the out of shape trainer.
No.
That's a bad look.
Yeah. So that's something this year I've paid attention to. I've never really let myself get completely off the hook, but I've lost 20 pounds since January 1st. Not that I got fat, but I just hit a point of yes, I'm busy. Yes, I've got a lot of stuff going on, but I've got
some sympathy weight from the baby.
I've actually gotten in better shape since having the baby.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But I think that more had to do with the realization of you want to be the best at this. You want to be the most respected in your industry. You better be living that 100%, even if you've got to sacrifice some other things in your life. And this year I've really been taking a hard look at those things that are, what do I want out of that? I really want my life to be centered and revolving around it. If this is a lifestyle for me, I want to make my environment conducive to that. I want to make my schedule conducive to that. So, and it's tough, but for me, that looks like at the beginning of the week, I've got a schedule in my workouts that I want to get done. Usually before I've got meetings, calls, other things put in there, I've got to put my big rocks in my schedule first. I've got to have an environment. So for me, it's having a garage gym handy, because life's going to happen, especially when we first had the baby. I still didn't miss a week of working out because I had a gym that I could walk across and go to that was right there. So yeah, maybe I'm not walking, or I'm not going to the gym to work out as much for those first couple months, but I was still hitting 4 days a week just because I made my environment conducive to that. I still had access to the equipment. And people always say, well, yeah, that's because you do this for a job and you've always just been a meathead. But if it's really a priority to you, you'll make it work, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the money that you spend on a vacation that nobody seems to have a problem with doing, you could easily spend on a garage gym and be set for. I mean, that stuff's going to last the rest of your training career. Like it's not like you got to replace stuff that often when you're using it in a private setting.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, people just have a difficult time with that.
Yeah.
And home gym training can be difficult, but it's also a really good solution for a lot of people.
I would agree.
Especially depending on, like, if you have a gym that's right by your house, it's a couple minutes away and it's easy to get there. They have availability when you need to be in there. That's different. Like, I feel like then you can make that work. Mm-hmm. But if you have a 20, 30 minute drive, that makes a huge difference.
It does. It does. On the same token, though, you'll probably make it work if it's a big enough priority.
If it's a big enough priority, absolutely.
Yeah. I think the times in my life that it started slipping, I didn't treat it as seriously as I wanted to, you know? And it's one of those things where when it started slipping, I didn't treat it like I did my job. When my job started taking priority over things, or social events are going out where I'm like, I'll move that workout to tomorrow. And then I just never ended up doing that. And that's one thing that I tell clients now is, like, especially if people are struggling, like, look, until the day that this becomes as important to you as your job, as anything else that is a non-negotiable for you, it's always going to be something that gets put on the back burner. Like, something's always going to come up. You're going to end up not going to the gym, not following your diet. As long as you give yourself any negotiation room, it's just going to be there. I mean, I'm sure for you, like you said, you went to a 6-day-a-week split. Was that something where, like, just making that part of your daily routine made it a non-negotiable?
Absolutely. If I just start my day like that every day, minus Sunday, I guess, then it's just so much more consistent for me. Like, if I have a rest day I was having a Wednesday or a Thursday rest day. So I was doing an upper day, lower day, rest, and then 3 more days. Mm-hmm. It was like chest and back, arms and shoulders, like something along those lines. And having that rest day on Wednesday, in my head, I was like, all right, perfect. I'll use that chunk of time to get to the office early and get caught up on some work, whatever. Which is that would be a beneficial thing for the business side of things. Yep. Having that extra time to take care of loose ends. But then I decided that if I take that time in the morning, it's going to be really easy to do that any other time that I happen to have a lot of work. Like, if I have the choice of whether or not I go to the gym in the morning, then it opens opportunity to not go. Mm-hmm. And if I just Monday through Saturday, we're going to the gym in the morning, just takes that off the table. So that has been helpful for me. Yeah. Not to say that you can't still have 3 or 4 days, make great progress and sustain it well. I just wanted to have that extra volume to kind of fall in love with the gym again. Yeah. And it's worked so far.
Making it easy on yourself.
How have you found has helped people make it a priority and keep it from falling off?
I think that people have to have a big enough why to start out with. For one, when we hop on, let's say we're doing an initial consult, I'm having an initial meeting with people before we really even start talking about what does their diet look like, what does their training look like. We have the conversation about why are we on this phone call to begin with. Sure, you want to look better. Sure, maybe you want more energy, but let's dive a little bit deeper. So if we can find something to where, let's say their dad died at 55 from heart-related issues, there's some genetic thing, and they're like, I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there for my family. That ends up being a pretty big reason that'll get you up in the morning compared to, I want to look good on the beach. So I think, like, getting deeper into people's reasons why, or creating a big enough why, I really think that that's important. Like, for me, I think it became amplified, and why I've prioritized it this year, even though I've got more on my plate, is, do I want to be that dad that's overweight and that can't play with his daughter, or that doesn't have energy for his kids? And so for me, like, my why honestly became bigger than it has been in the last few years outside of getting married. Just more responsibilities amplified that for me. So, if it's a very surface level thing, that's all there is. If you've got that goal plus other, bigger why, awesome. But it's not big enough, eventually you're going to fall off the table. So I think that that's probably the main thing.
Having a why is huge.
Yeah.
That makes, like we've said before, it gives you a reason to be in the gym each day. Because if you don't have some bigger picture that you're working towards, whether it's a date on the calendar or forecasting that to 5 years down the road when you're playing with the kids and you're out of shape, something like that. That just gives you that urgency to actually get in there and make a difference.
Yeah. Repeat your question again. Go back. So you said how do you
how do you help people make fitness a priority so that it's not slipping away? Like we talked about, that priority level just starts to slip away. You start to focus on other things, which is natural. You have more things going on. There's more on your plate, but how do you keep fitness as one of those top priorities? It might not be the most important thing in your life, but having it as a consistent staple that you can lean on.
So I think once you establish that why and that reason, after that, I think this goes back to the book Atomic Habits. You've got to associate whatever you're doing or you're trying to start with something pleasurable. So whether that's rewarding yourself with something, whether you're associating something pleasurable. And an example of this was this guy started running, and every time he ran, he put a nicotine patch on. So, and he would only put a nicotine patch on when he was running. So he started associating like that dopamine response with running and then became addicted to running. I don't think people need to do that, but how do you, if you're getting started, make it as pleasurable as possible? How do you, listening to good music, putting yourself in an environment, in a community that you enjoy being around? That's why I think CrossFit, even though it may not be the best for people that have orthopedic issues and stuff, but it's so good because there's a community aspect built into that. So finding ways for it to be as enjoyable and as pleasurable as possible, and getting early wins, I think, is big. Because when we're talking fitness, when we're talking nutrition, you're not going to see amazing results on the scale or in the mirror after one workout, right? You might start seeing them after 100. You're definitely going to start seeing it after 500 workouts. But those small wins of how you start feeling, how you start functioning, and focusing on those things ends up keeping people going. Because it can be really tough. Like those initial phases of getting into fitness are super tough because you don't see those big results. I think getting people past that initial stage is by focusing on those small things. Are you feeling better? Do you have more energy? Do you have more mental clarity at your job? Focus on those things, and people are like, all right, like I'm starting to see these small changes. And then once you get to that threshold of boom, I'm seeing results with my body, I'm seeing the scale change, I'm seeing the mirror change, then it just kind of takes care of itself once you get there. But you've got to get past those initial phases, which is why I think a lot of people that are the January 1sters really struggle, right? They never really get past that initial phase, and it's like, oh man, I'm not seeing results after month 1 and 2. Yeah, I'm going to stop. And then it's, they restart it the next year. So what would you say?
I think you just got to make it a habit. Like once it becomes a staple of your routine, that consistency over time is going to be what produces the results anyways. So if you can, like you were saying, if you can make it a habit, that's huge. Or back in the day, having a gym partner made a huge difference. Having somebody that has the accountability for you to actually show up when you say you're going to show up and put in the work. And if you can't find somebody that you train with in person, then it could be somebody that you're texting, some type of accountability partner. It can be huge to at least, like you were saying, get you down the right path.
How do you develop that habit?
I think you got to have a plan. A lot of people don't have a plan behind their training. Yeah. So then they kind of if you don't have a plan, then it kind of leaves it up to the day-to-day as far as whether or not you go.
Yeah.
So if you just know you need to go to the gym, just like you needed to go to the gym yesterday, but you didn't, but it's just some imaginary fictitious thing that you're pushing off, as opposed to if you have a schedule that you have a chest day on this day, back day on this day, whatever, that's not something you can just push off because it would pile up on the next day.
Yeah.
Like you have to get those workouts in. So I think having a plan and structure for it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Because I hear that a lot. People know that they need to make stuff a habit. They're like, yeah, I know I need to go to the gym. Yeah, I know to be eating good every single day. But obviously, if we've got a 60, 70% obesity rating with the most amount of understanding and awareness ever, people know what macros are. People know what protein is. People know about gyms, but yet we're worse off than we were 50 years ago when nobody knew about crazy, that stuff. Man. It's a weird reality. And I get it. I mean, we're busier now. We have more distractions. And honestly, probably the influx of information that we're exposed to just makes everything more complicated. Because, all right, we have all this information, but then if we don't do anything with it, or we're just overwhelmed by it all, then it's not doing us any good. It's the people that are the inspirational bros that listen to all the podcasts and they read all the books and then
just don't do anything with it.
Yeah. Making it a habit.
You got to make it a habit.
What for you became the point where, I think another thing of making things into a habit or getting going is you reach that threshold where whenever the pain exceeds the uncomfortableness of starting and continuing to go with that. For you, was there ever a point where you reached that point of like, all right, I'm going to make a change. This is going to become a habit for me?
There wasn't really a specific moment that I recall making that decision. It was more so just like I said in the last episode, I think we had a Mexico wedding on the calendar. That was it was far enough out, but that was like a concrete date that I was like, okay, I'm going to be at the beach in however long it was, 9 months, 6 months, whatever it was. And it gave me more of a reason to focus on it.
When you first started though, like high school or previous?
Oh, way back when. Oh, wow. I think I just wanted to be better at sports.
Yeah.
It was the biggest thing. So I started lifting weights the summer going into my 7th grade year for football. So we would go in the mornings, work out, go work after. I think that's that's pretty much how it started.
Yeah.
How did you originally get into the gym?
I didn't start really lifting until college. I did, I would do like 100 push-ups before bed at night, starting when I was 13, 14. That was mainly because I wanted to be better at sports. But also, like, I was tired of just being skinny, which I still was skinny and ended up being skinny up until that freshman year of college. I would say I got really hooked on the bug of lifting. When I got to college, I started, but I was just that person that was a squirrel, like, boom, boom, boom. I'm going to do everything.
Like online
in
workouts
the gym.
or?
No. I would just run to the gym of like, this sounds like this. I'm going to do this today, doing the things I like. Do some trap bar deadlifts and this machine. It was a college gym. It was, old and they had certain things. So I would just kind of do it all with no structure. And then when I had that summer with my buddy after my freshman year, where everything was structured, we had coaches, we had designs, which still wasn't the best, but just the intensity was there. Where we had like specific leg days or upper body days. Like it wasn't great training structure, but we just had the intensity. And I was a noob, so I just responded super well to that. I think that's where I really started seeing changes. I started seeing changes, like putting on that weight within the course of the year. I'm like, man, like this is pretty cool that you can do that and you can completely change how you feel, how you look, how you perform. That was when I got hooked on that bug. Yeah.
The old freshman 20.
The old freshman 20. Yeah, which is freshman 50, but in a good way.
50, yeah.
Yeah. And from there, I just enjoy diving into it. I always research stuff. You read those old T Nation articles. You listen to those initial podcasts and stuff. And so I don't know. I just started getting roped into it. All the magazines and the books that we had access to before the internet really took off. I enjoyed starting reading those. I enjoyed doing it myself, and after college, I couldn't see myself really being involved with anything different at that point, you know?
Were there any fitness influencers that had an impact on you back in the day? Were you paying attention to any of that?
I think after that freshman year, DeFranco's gym, you know, DeFranco's, he had a couple of highlight videos. He was training all those NFL players there, and it was, you know, West Side Barbell style of training with the chains and the sleds and stuff. That got me hooked. I like watching that stuff.
I never saw his videos, but I did watch or listen to a few of his podcasts. I forgot about him.
Yeah.
That was forever ago.
Yeah. I think reading the T Nation, I don't know, I can't just name specific names on those articles.
Yeah.
There's probably people that I'm forgetting about. But I think it was seeing the people when we went down to Arizona. We worked out with some trainers that were ex-football players, and they were just jacked. And so I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
That makes a big difference. If you can be around it.
Yeah.
That's another thing that can help people stay motivated in general, though, is the environment that you're training at. Like if you find a facility that you can train at that's encouraging, motivating, there's people there that you aspire to look like or perform like, that's going to make it a lot more encouraging to go. Mm-hmm. Whereas there's definitely some gyms that I've been to that you go in there and obviously you should be able to kind of flip your own switch, so to speak, and be motivated. It shouldn't matter necessarily what the external situation is, but there's some gyms you go into that it's like, wow, I don't know how people would train hard here. And if you have that mindset, if a gym makes you think that, it's going to be difficult to train hard there.
Yeah. Environment makes a big deal. Huge deal. What for you do you look for or that helps you in a training environment now? Like today.
I think the clientele that goes to the gym makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And that can be, there's going to be obviously attributes about the gym that bring out more people. Like we're both training at Flex Fitness right now. So there's a lot of bodybuilders that train there. It's kind of became the hub of bodybuilding out of Kansas City, at least from my perspective. Yep. Being around that, and there's always people that are in good shape or better shape than you almost probably 95% of the time that you're in there. And that's, for me, really encouraging because it just shows you what's possible. Like, it's fun to be the big guy at the gym. I've had those stints where I've been one of the bigger guys at the gym, and then it can be a little bit of, you kind of forget there's another level to it.
That, going back to what we talked about maybe community and environment with getting into the gym. I think that's something that can take you to the next level. For sure. I think before going to Flex, I've been primarily working out at another, let's call it a boutique-esque gym. Nice equipment, nice facilities, but house music, you know, nobody's really training hard. Most people are on their cell phones. And then getting back into something like Flex, I would say the most productive training environment I was ever in was in college in a shitty weight room with literally just squat racks, dumbbells that were all bent, chalk.
A little bit rusty.
Loud music, dude.
Oh, yeah.
And it's crazy how we get so caught up in equipment, you know, this machine or this bar, XYZ, but the environment that created with just a bunch of dudes screaming and yelling and loud music was a driving force, me being in the best shape I was ever in. You know, now I've got access to gyms with whatever equipment and stuff, but my training definitely was not great previous couple of years. Going to Flex was like, and being around those people, and I'm in no way a bodybuilder, but being around those people that are at that next level, people are really training hard, they're getting after it. I think that's a huge thing.
It is.
You've got to be around whatever that environment is for you that pushes you to the next level. And the thing about fitness is that, and why I like it so much is it's honest. You can't get cute with it. Like the people that are in great shape, you can't get there unless you're just a genetically gifted person who would look that way or perform that way regardless. Like you've really got to put in the work. It's got to be pretty gritty.
Yeah.
And the results speak for themselves, whether that's performance, whether that's how you look. There's no way of buying it. There's no way of getting around it, you know?
I think that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's in good shape and you can tell that they have the hard work, the dedication to put in the work day after day for months, years on end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that says a lot about somebody's character too.
Yeah. It's something that you hear the gurus talk about now, which there's a lot of them now. Like you see a lot of people that are doing well in business. They have good marriages, they've got good relationships, and they're also in great shape. Like you're hearing that coming out a lot more. I feel like we live in a cool day and age where you've got a lot more successful people that are preaching fitness first and foremost. Like before you can operate a team, before you can be great with your mind, before you can be great with business stuff, like you've got to take care of the discipline from your body, and that just trickles into every other aspect of life, which is, I mean, it's so true, you know, and if you can handle that and you can get really dialed in, I feel like it doesn't always, but it can translate into other things. Like I would say that if you were to take a bodybuilder, not every single one of them do it, but they might be the best people set up for success in most realms of life because they've got to be so disciplined in that one area. They got to be so dedicated that, you know, if you took that into every other aspect of life, it would be game over.
I think it's hard for a lot of guys to translate that.
Why do you think that is?
I think they just don't have the reward attached to the work. Like when you're in the gym day after day, month after month, year after year, you can correlate that effort to the results that you see.
Yeah.
But if you don't have those results when you get into whatever you're doing, like business wise, at least at the beginning, like we kind of tend to forget that.
Yeah.
Like when you first started going to the gym, it probably kind of sucked, or it was fun, but like you were paying for it. You were sore, you were hurt and everything like that. And for whatever reason, you stuck with it long enough that you started to see results and you got motivated. And I feel like people don't give it that time and they just start doing something and then they don't audit what they're doing. They just keep doing the same thing over and over. Which if that happens in the gym, eventually you're going to get tired of not making any progress and you're going to change something. Mm-hmm. Or at least most people would. And you just got to do that same thing in life.
I can see that. Yeah.
What's the most fun season of training that you've had?
I would say my senior year of college. It was a good environment. We had 20, 30 guys in there that were just getting after it. You know, you had everybody that is nostalgic about some area, you know, their previous life. But going back to that, and I was telling this client I was talking to about transitioning from being an athlete to not being an athlete anymore, that's one of the things that I missed the most was that aspect. Shitty equipment, rusty iron, but everybody was just there to get better and everybody was getting after it. Being in groups and having that culture of pushing each other, you know, guys with bloody shins from tripping over box jumps and stuff, and you're screaming at, got to get up and do it again. And that was by far the most fun.
That sounds like a good time.
It was a good time. It was a good time. I see where people get into CrossFit, you know, like high level. I get it.
I get it. I think I never took the jump, but I think I would have loved it.
Yeah.
Is it still relevant? I know a lot of places are dropping the CrossFit name and just going with functional fitness or functional strength.
I don't know. Never really got into it, so I couldn't tell you. I love watching the CrossFit Games.
It looks like a blast.
Like, regardless of what anybody says, it's impressive.
The guys that are at the games are in good shape too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's cool watching that too, because these are all former high-level athletes in some capacity, whether they were wrestlers, whether they were swimmers. Like a lot of those guys have those backgrounds, and And it's fun to watch. Like, I've never done CrossFit, but I do like watching them. I do have respect for those guys that can, it's really impressive. You know, if you can deadlift 700 pounds and you can do a handstand walk the entire length of a football field, like, kudos to you.
That's pretty impressive.
I'm not going to take anything away from that at all. Yeah. Where do you think people get tripped up on fitness wise with the goal not aligning with how they're working out? Because I see this a lot in terms of like you maybe want to look great, but you're going to do CrossFit. Where do you think that issue lies for people, where maybe people could benefit more in their journey fitness wise?
I think a lot of people discount the nutrition side, clearly. Obviously, if you've been in the gym and you've made progress, you've been in good shape before, then you know how important nutrition is to that. And that's huge. But the other thing is, at the end of the day, I think if you find something that you enjoy doing, that's the most important part, so that you stick with it. But that's if you just want to be in better shape generally, which can be a tricky place, because if you want optimal results, I think that's where a lot of people get kind of caught up in the weeds where they can. But in my opinion, I mean, bodybuilding is going to be the best way to get you to look better aesthetically. But if somebody doesn't like training like that and they hate weighing out their food, whatever it is, and then they just don't do it, well, that's probably not going to be the best for them.
Yeah.
But it's very different training styles depending on what your goal is. You're absolutely right. Like when I was trying to be strong, I'm not doing sets of 25.
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing sets of 2 to 6. So there's little things that create a pretty big difference.
Have you had to ask yourself that question? Like right now, with being in this season of growth and expansion professionally, of like, you know, what's my goal now? Like, do I want to be the 500-pound bencher anymore? Or do I want to find something that's maybe a different route?
Yeah, so right now I'm just kind of chasing to get back to where I was from a muscle standpoint.
Okay.
I'm in relatively good shape now from a body fat perspective or percentage, but need to put another 15, 20 pounds of muscle back on to kind of get to sort of where I was.
Okay.
And I wouldn't mind being the 500-pound bench guy again. What I don't think I'm going to do, or I have a hard time picturing right now, is a full powerlifting meet.
Okay.
I don't think I want to get under any heavy squats anytime soon.
Yeah.
I've been squatting, it feels good, but pushing those boundaries, I don't know if I'm really, the risk versus reward's not really beneficial to me anymore. At least not right now.
Yeah. I agree. I think that when people come in and say, I just see a lot of mixed goals that are not lining up with what they're doing. Like people come in, let's use that CrossFit example.
Okay.
They want to look like Rich Froning.
Of course. I did too.
Yeah. I think we all would. But I don't think most people realize that majority of people that are doing CrossFit would do that, whether they were doing CrossFit or whether they were doing water aerobics. Like they're still going to look pretty good with what they're doing. So you get a lot of these people that aren't as genetically gifted, that didn't come from the backgrounds training wise that those people did. And they're like, I want to look like that. So that's why I'm going to do CrossFit. And majority of people get disappointed because they don't end up looking like Rich Froning after doing CrossFit for a year. And that's where I think, like, you know, from an aesthetics portion, CrossFit's a performance thing. Like at the end of the day, like if you're trying to do good in CrossFit, because I mean, ultimately, if you're competing in CrossFit, you're worried about rankings, coming in first place with what you're doing. Your abs don't really fall into that equation. You're not getting based on how good you look being on the podium.
No bonus points for the veins?
No.
What?
No. And so people go into that in a performance environment where you probably need to be fueling for that, being in at least a calorie maintenance, if not a surplus, to recover from a crazy demanding sport like CrossFit. But then they get angry that they don't look like Rich Froning as a result of that, you know, or people want to train arms and chest 5 days a week, but then, you know, wonder why they don't have the cardiovascular benefit to go out and, you know, play beer league softball for 5 hours a day. And so like the aligning of like, what do I really want? What are really my priorities? I walk people through that, and usually by the end of the conversation, they're like, oh, maybe I don't really want to be doing that. Maybe living to be 109 years old, maybe I'm willing to give that up a little bit if I have my abs for a few years, and I'm willing to diet down a little bit harder and train a little bit harder, and maybe I'm sacrificing a couple years off my life. And so I think that like lining that up, and that's something I ask myself is like, all right, do I care that much now about training speed deadlifts? Yeah, maybe some benefit from an athletic portion, maybe a mobility portion of that. But like, with my limited bandwidth that I have, training equity wise, and then just my physical output, my bandwidth between work, training, having a wife, having a kid, do I really want to be putting my eggs in that basket anymore? Maybe at times it could be beneficial, and I'm probably moosing out on some things, but no, I don't really care right now. I'd rather go in. I'd rather put that equity towards like some hamstring curls on a machine and stuff, and call it a day. Have my hamstrings look a little bit better, not have as much fatigue, and so asking myself those questions about, do I really care about being or training a certain way, or maybe being in a power lifter right now versus I want to maintain looking good. I want to be in relatively good shape across the board, even though maybe I'm sacrificing absolute strength. I'm sacrificing absolute athleticism, but the priority right now is being healthy, looking good. I think looking good for me, that's why I train primarily bodybuilding style now. And then having enough energy to put that towards family and work,
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah, bro.
The balance is important. Not to say that work-life balance this, balance that. There's going to be seasons where things are out of whack, and whatever your priority is at the time is getting the lion's share of your attention and energy. But fitness is something that can go along right with whatever else you have going on in life, and it's most likely in almost every scenario going to make it better.
Have you had to look at or approach your bandwidth differently?
I think that's something I need to address just across the board. I think I do a terrible job of that.
Okay.
But from a fitness standpoint specifically though, yes, absolutely. Like if I do decide, hey, I want to be the 500-pound bench guy again, like that kind of restructures almost my entire training program. Yeah. So right now that's just not a priority because I don't want to barbell bench 4 times a week.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Subject to change though.
Subject to change.
Subject to change.
Yeah. Maybe this winter.
Probably. This winter when I know I'm not going to be on a beach, I'll start maybe throwing a little bit of weight around. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think this is a good episode too.
I do too.
I always enjoy talking about fitness. I'm sure that's going to be a topic that we hit on quite often.
I agree. And also I think talking about it from the perspective of where we're at versus just preaching about this is what you need to do to look like this or get to the certain point of like having people think maybe a little bit differently about it in their lives, our experiences of it, and hopefully people get some value from that.
I hope so.
Well, we'll find out if people watch it.
Let us know.
Let us know
if you got value from this.
Yeah. I think in the future too, we start getting some questions.
I think that would be
if we know the topic we're going to start talking about and people want specific questions answered, let us know.
I like it. We'll catch you next time.
Till next time. Peace.